Today, I want to give you 3 simple riding tips that are applicable to every kind of rider, every kind of riding discipline, and any experience level. These tips are going to help you ride more fluidly with your horse, in better connection with less tension and stiffness. So let's get started. I'm Callie. I'm here with my horse Noelle, and the first of these tips may be the most important, and it's probably also the most simple, but it's something that we just have to keep coming back to. It has to do with the amount of tension that we hold in our bodies. Doesn't matter how long you've been riding, there's some place that you tend to hold tension. We often have habits of where we hold tension, and they're not just when we're riding. For example, you may find that when you get stressed or when you're worried or anxious, that you tend to pull your shoulders up and get tight across your back and across your shoulders and your neck. You may find that maybe your jaw gets really tight and you tend to clamp your jaw and you can kind of feel the tension through your face. You may find that you tend to curl your toes in your boots like you're trying to grip the stirrup. Or that you grip in with your knees like you're clinging on to the horse for dear life as you ride. Where do you hold tension? And where do you find that your most common tension pattern is? So here's the deal with tension when we ride. Of course, we have to have an amount of tone. We have to use our muscles and use our body effectively in order to stay with the horse, to move effectively with the horse. The key to good riding and the key to really any movement is finding this right amount of tension. Too much tension and we stiffen our joints. We can't move fluidly. When we're riding, we feel out of sync, like we're not with the movement of the horse. Too little tension and we don't have good posture. We're leaning to one side or we feel like we're just flopping around on the back of the horse. So the key is finding the right amount. So this first tip is, where do you tend to hold the most tension? What is your habit? And I'm going to take you through a little body scan to find this for yourself. So follow along with me wherever you're watching this video. Take a moment. You may even want to close your eyes so that you can really just go inward and really feel your body for a minute. And start down at your toes. Notice your toes, your feet, your ankles, coming up into your calves, your knees, thighs, your hips, your pelvis, your stomach, coming up into your chest, your rib cage, your shoulders, across the front of your chest, your back, your mid-back, your upper back, into your neck, into your jaw. Where did you notice that you were holding tension? Now, I went through that pretty quickly, but I encourage you to go through a little more slowly. And anywhere that you find that you're holding tension, you're going to squeeze it tighter and let it go. So let's try that together. I want you to close your eyes. Notice where you're holding tension. Right now I'm feeling it in my back. It's kind of chilly out here. I'm a little cold. My shoulders are up, my back's a little tight. So I'm gonna make that super tight. In fact, I'm gonna just squeeze in everything. Make my face tight, make a fist, make my back tight, pull my shoulders up. Hold, and then let it go. When you do this kind of conscious over tightening, making everything really tense and tight, and then letting it go, you start to train your body what that difference feels like. And you're going to start noticing more when your pattern of tension and tightness begins. So that was our first tip. Where do you hold tension? Now for the second tip, we're going to help find this right amount of tension. There's a wonderful illustration from probably the Bible of good riding, Centered Riding by Sally Swift. This is an excellent book that I highly recommend. And there's a particular visual in this book of a string on the top of your helmet pulling up. to have this feeling of sitting lighter, of sitting taller. But depending on how we interpret this, it could actually take us to lifting our chin, bringing our chest out, and not being in a very stable position. So here's how I would encourage you to think about this idea of the string lifting. As the string lifts you from your helmet and from the top of your head, imagine lengthening from the top of your neck, so where your skull meets your cervical vertebra. And think about just lengthening there. And as you do that, notice the space between your vertebra, all the way down your spine. And see if you can imagine, just in your mind, doesn't need to be a big movement, but as you lift there from the back of your skull, from the top of your neck, if you could just feel a little bit more space coming into each vertebra, into that space between each vertebra. Now, as you do this little simple exercise, you actually are finding a bit more tension. You're engaging some muscles to make this movement, but you're lengthening instead of contracting those muscles. And you're finding this idea of tension where we can have tone, we can have good alignment, we can have good posture without being stiff and tight and bracing. So this is tip number 2, string on the top of the helmet, but thinking about it starting from the top of the neck and feeling the space come into your spine. The third tip that I want to give you is also going to help with this idea of tension, and it's about how your foot meets the stirrup. So here's the thing. We spend so much of our movement through life pushing off of our feet. We push our feet against the ground to stand. We push against the ground to walk and to move. But when we're in the stirrups, the more that we push on the stirrups, the more that we brace our joints, and the more that it inhibits our ability to move fluidly and easily with our horse. So we want our foot to rest in the stirrup. We want our leg to be lengthening into the stirrup. Just like we lengthened our spine up, we want to lengthen our leg down to the stirrup without pushing. So here's a little fun exercise to help you feel this. First, just begin with your foot in the stirrup. Pick your foot up and then lightly set it down again. And you can do this in your imagination as you're watching this video, even if you're not riding right now. Hopefully you aren't riding as you're watching videos. So lift your foot up and then just let it sink back down in the stirrup. And as you do this, see if you can find where the weight of your leg meets the stirrup, but without pushing. And notice if you can feel your habit. If as soon as your foot settles into the stirrup, if you want to do some little adjustments like this and find where that normal habit place is for your leg in the stirrups. So there's 2 exercises that can help with this. The first is something that I do with my students, and I'll actually do this and then I ask them to imagine it. You can imagine it unless your instructor is rather brave and trusting like I am with my students. But imagine if someone had their fingers between your boot and the stirrup. So I actually do this with my students and I ask them to walk around and I walk beside them with my hand there. And of course, they don't want to crush my fingers and push down on my hand. But I tell them, make sure you keep the consistent amount of pressure there. Don't let me pull my hand out. And this is a really good way, even just in your mind, to imagine if someone was there and they just had their hand and you wanted to keep their hand there so they couldn't pull it out, but you don't want to crush their fingers against the stirrup. That's about the amount of pressure that we want with the stirrup. Another really fun exercise, and this is one that I included in my book, Stay in the Saddle, is to take a simple cloth, like an ace bandage is perfect, wrap it around the bottom of the stirrup, and what that creates is a squishy feeling. It's kind of like recreating that feeling of someone's fingers there. That little squishiness gives you something that you can press into, but you don't want to just push down until all of that squishiness leaves. So you just find that where there's a little bit of that kind of elastic, squishy feeling in your stirrup. So a simple exercise that you can use to remind yourself as you're riding around to keep that light amount of pressure, that weight and that lengthening into the stirrup instead of pushing. So let's do a super quick review. Tip number 1 was do a body scan, find where you hold tension, tighten that area, and let it go. Basically, be aware of your patterns of holding tension. In the second tip, we went through an exercise to find that right amount of tension by lengthening with the string and allowing that feeling to lengthen along our spine, lengthening up. And then we went down to the lower body. We thought about foot in the stirrup, and I gave you those 2 ideas of squishy stirrup and imagining someone's hand there so that you can find weight in the stirrup and lengthening down. So you notice that today's riding tips were really a lot about this idea of tension and finding the right amount of tension as we're moving. Good alignment is something that will set you up for success, and we have many other resources here at Horse Class to help you. Now I would love to hear from you. What is a riding tip that has really helped you in your riding? Leave a comment down below, scroll through and read the other comments. Thank you for being a part of our community, and thank you for watching. If you want more exercises like this, then check out my book, Stay in the Saddle, for a collection of exercises, beginner through advanced, warm-up, rider exercises, and training exercises that you can modify for just the right amount of challenge for you and your horse. You can learn more about the book down below.